Good Erev Shabbos to everyone. Erev Shabbos, Parshas Sisa. It's also Parshas Para. Here's the question that I would like you to ask at your Shabbos table, share with your children, with your spouse, with your parents, family, friends. Here's the question. The Parsha starts off. Sisa, V'yidabashal Moshe Lemor, Sisa is Rosh B'nei Yisrael, L'fkudehem, when you're going to come and count Klal Yisrael. V'nosnu ish koifer nafshe l'Hashem b'fkoiroisam, v'yiyah b'hem negef b'fkoiroisam. You shall give, each man shall give Hashem an atonement for his soul when counting them, so that there will be no plague among those who are being counted. So we all know, Rashi tells us that they counted Klal Yisrael. Moshe Rabbeinu counted Klal Yisrael with the machzah shekel. Every yid gave a half a shekel, because, says Rashi, shehaminyan sholit ba'ayin hara, v'hadever ba'alei. When you count someone, when you count a group of people, that causes an ayin hara, an evil eye, to come upon them. V'hadever ba'alei, pestilence will come, that we find in B'mei David. Therefore, Zayidnu Kalev al Pikudah Machzis HaShekel B'Shekel HaKodesh. You give a Machzis HaShekel. We all know from the time we were children, that you don't count 1, 2, 3, 4. You count the yarmulkes, you count the glasses maybe, or the shirts. You don't count the Jew. Because a minyan, when you're doing a counting, that causes an ayin hara. For a minyan, we do Hashia Samecha. We do not do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I would like to pose 2 questions and answer them with one answer, but there are multiple answers that you can give to both these questions. Question number 1, what is the ayin hara exactly with regard to a census, to counting? If I'm going to count people for a minyan, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, why does that create an ayin hara? Why does that create an evil eye? What is it about the minyan? Question number 1 to throw out at your Shabbos table. Question number 2, so Hashem chose the machzis hashekel to be the unit to count Klal Yisrael. Why not a shekel? Just give a shekel. Why a machzis shekel? Give a shekel. So I asked the boys on our Wednesday night learning program here, Boys Beis Medrash, I asked them the question. They all said maybe it was too much. People can't afford it. The very practical, could be richtige and mistige answer. But is there a more fundamental reason why HaKadosh Baruch Hu chose dafka a half a shekel and not a complete shekel? 2 questions. What is the ayin hara with the minyan? And why the machzis, why the half a shekel, not the whole shekel? So Rabbeinu Bechaya addresses the first question, which is what exactly is the danger of a minyan? And he says that there's something called safety in numbers. There's something called the Jew is more safe when he's in the HaTzibur. There's a koyach of HaTzibur that protects the individual yid. And once the yid is put on a pedestal, an individual by himself, so then there's a certain spotlight that is fixed on this individual, and it might not be so positive. Various Gedolei Balei HaMusar, even though there's an inyan to get an aliyah on the Yamim Noiram and Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, they didn't want an aliyah. They did not want the Gabbai to call out their name, Moshe ben Yaakov. They did not want that they should be, highlighted on the Yom Hadin. Safety in numbers, B'seich Ami Anochi Yeshavis. The danger of a minyan, says the Rabbeinu Bechai, the danger of the census of counting 1, 2, 3, 4, is that you're singling out one Jew at a time, and he's losing the zechus of the HaTzibur. He's losing the zechus of the community. We all know there are many Yidden now that are moving around to different places in the United States, outside the United States. When a Yid looks into a new community where he's going to move, one of the first things he checks out is the community. What are the shuls like? What are the schools like? A religious Jew cannot live by himself. We only can survive in a HaTzibur. And that's the lesson, says the Rabbeinu Chai, that the minyan is teaching us that a Yid should never be highlighted by himself. It should always be part of the group. An extreme example of this is the famous Ma'aseh with the Chafetz Chaim. It's true. Yeah, it's with the Chafetz Chaim. You'll hear why it's not exactly with the Chafetz Chaim, but many, many years after the Chafetz Chaim was nifter, he was buried in Radin, if I'm not mistaken, and the government wanted to build a shopping mall, something on top of the Jewish cemetery. And the government still remembered the Goyim were tremendously influenced by the Chafetz Chaim and affected by him, and saw his tzidkus. They remember this holy Jew, and they tracked down one of his closest living disciples to tell him that they're giving a special dispensation. We can move the Chafetz Chaim's kever anywhere you want. Take it to Eretz Yisrael, a different basic forest in Europe, wherever you want. We're going to give you reshus to move the Chafetz Chaim's kever. But we can't exhume all the bodies, it's too much. So the Shaila came to Rabbi Aaron Cutler, and the Aaron Cutler said, don't move the Chafetz Chaim's kever. Don't. He said it would pain his great Rebbe to think that his kever, his grave is being moved, but all the other Yidden there are remaining behind, so to speak, and their graves will be desecrated. I sit amongst my nation. Even though the Chavetz Chaim was the Gadol Ador, he didn't view himself as different than everyone else. Don't single me out. I'm just a Pashati. I'm like all other Yidden. Don't leave me. Don't take me away from there. So it's an amazing ma'aseh where Rabbi Aaron Kotler paskined essentially that the Goyim should build a building on top of the Chavetz Chaim's kever because it was so clear to the Chavetz Chaim's Talmud what the Chavetz Chaim's view in life was. That's the end of the story. L'maaseh, the epilogue is that they ended up not building that shopping strip, whatever it was, and the basic forest stayed intact. But that's not really relevant to the story. The story is the amazing chinuch that the Chavetz Chaim was able to give over to his Talmidim, that all those years later, with confidence, Aaron Kotler was able to paskin to leave the Chavetz Chaim's kever there. But it's this concept of not sticking out. A Yid should not try to stick out. He's part of the tzibur. Why the machzis hashekel? Why the half a shekel? Our second question, for the same reason. To give a whole shekel, I'm a unit. I'm a fartige unit, as we say in Yiddish. No. Each Yid is a machzis hashekel. I cannot reach my shleimus without you. And you cannot reach your shleimus without him or without her. We're in it together. The machzis hashekel, the half a shekel, is to teach us that each Jew, each Yid by himself is only a half. And we can only coexist. We can only thrive. We can only reach our potential in the context of HaTzibur. That is the idea of the machzis hashekel. Signifying the need to have HaTzibur. On my own, I had a thought I'd like to share with you about the machzis hashekel, and that is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is teaching us, the second answer to that question, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is teaching us that the ikar is not how much, the ikar is how. In other words, HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't look in as much to see how much a person donated. HaKadosh Baruch Hu looks at the action, at the donation. If a person was giving with his whole heart, a person was extending himself, whether that's $1, $100, or $100,000. That's not so relevant. What's relevant is the actions that a person does, the Mesiras Nefesh. It's not the result that is in our control, but it's the action that's in our control. That's the idea, I think, of Parshas Sisa, of the beginning of the counting the minyan based on the Rabbeinu Bechaya, the tremendous maila and necessity to be part of HaTzibur, to be involved with HaTzibur, to be oisik b'tzarech HaTzibur. We should all be zoiche that as HaTzibur together here in Hollywood, in America, in the ganze Welt, in the entire world, we should be zoiche to have a wonderful Shabbos, good Shabbos.